I think the biggest surprise was that for 8 months, the company told us that it was going to be only, and I'm going to put this into quote, only minus 20. And it turned out to be in springtime, it got to be minus 40. And even the Inuits out there told us that it had never happened, like in history, that kind of temperature. So no one really knew one another as such. And we had to work together, to train together, but also once we got to the Arctic, to realize what were the skills of each other to be able to do what we had to do.
Welcome to Leadership Disrupted. We have a very special guest today, and I know I often say that when I introduce our guests, and I know I often say really nice things. Of course, you when you're introducing a guest for your podcast, you're going to have lovely things to say about them because, of course, you invited them to your podcast, and you want them to feel welcome. So, of course, I always say positive things, and yet I hesitate to say today's guest is particularly special. Because, of course, I all of the guests are special. But Leela Bassi, who's with us today, is a really special guest. I've worked with Leela in a variety of environments. Leela is a leadership development speaker, trainer, thinker. She is somebody who has had life experiences that go beyond what most of us have ever experienced. And she's somebody who integrates those experiences into her thinking, into the programs that she delivers, into her engagements with clients. And I just think that you're going to find this particular conversation very engaging and interesting. And hopefully you'll learn a lot and learn a lot that you can apply in your own world. So first of all, Leela, welcome to Leadership Disrupted and welcome to the conversation. Is there anything you would like to share about your background at the beginning, just to orient people toward who you are before we dive deep into the conversation itself?
Sure, absolutely. First of all, thank you very much for having me, Dan. It's a pleasure to be on the show. As you all know, my name is Leela Bassi. So a little bit of background about myself. Well, I was actually born in India, and I stayed at the orphanage for a couple of years, and I was then adopted by a white French family. So for the first part of my life, I grew up in France, in the north of France. After university, I decided to move to the UK for various reasons. I'm sure we will have a chance to talk about it today on the podcast. But I really felt like I did not have my place back in France because of my skin color. And I did find my place when I arrived actually in the UK. This completely changed me and changed my life. I married an Italian and we have 2 children. Who are both trilingual as well, so it's a very international, family. And I've learned a lot in the last, I would say, 30 years almost that I've been here, and all around leadership, all around the skills that I gained through various trips that I went on, and I'm excited to talk to you about it today.
Leela, you are so educated, refined, and cultured. I'm really excited. You are upping the culture game for the Leadership Disrupted podcast, just because the word that springs to mind whenever I hear you speak is elegance. You speak with authority, with competence, and with elegance. So I'm happy to up our elegance game at the Leadership Disrupted podcast. And I think a good place to start would be, could you tell us about your most formative experiences that have led you to become the leader that you are today?
Yes. There've been several moments that really shaped me, but if I can think of 2 in particular that really stand out, they are these 2. So the first one was when I began to question the version of success that I had been chasing my entire life. I'd spent many years adapting while I was in France, trying to fit in, proving myself into spaces that were not always built for someone like me. So somewhere along the way, I started to lose touch with who I really was. And maybe more truthfully, I actually lost sight of who I had the potential to be back in those days. So that realization really marked the beginning of quite a deep shift, both personally and professionally. And then came the Arctic in 2015. So what happened there is I joined an expedition to the Arctic Circle as part of an initiative to challenge how people think about diversity and inclusion. The trip itself was for just under 3 weeks, but during that time, we dragged 50-kilo sledge. We slept on ice in tents in minus 40 degrees. 40 degrees Celsius, and also I've traveled alongside people that I barely knew, so it was actually brutal, but at the same time it was also really stunning because it stripped everything back to the essential. So what I'm saying here is there were no titles, there was no role, just people trying to survive, just trying to support one another and get through it together. So that experience really forced me to see that leadership differently. And it's not about having power over other people. All right, it's about how you show up when things are hard, how you actually listen even when your cognitive capacity is fading from that freezing cold out there. It's really how you contribute to the collective without losing yourself. So that's really the first one. And if I have to talk about the second one, and again, that's going to be another one of my trip, because I seem to think that these trips have really shaped me in many ways. But the second one is a lot more recent. Last month, I was at Everest Base Camp. So I returned from this journey with a different group of women this time. And it really reminded me that leadership means different things to different people. Some lead by going ahead to show what is actually possible. Others, they really stay close to someone who might be struggling. And then there are those leaders who stand at the back of the group, observing and encouraging. And I have to say that experience reinforced my belief that we are all leaders, all right, just in different ways. And the key is really understanding what kind of leaders you are and having the courage to own it.
Well, and as we unpack those extreme experiences, going back to the Arctic, I think there's something very relevant today within that experience, because I think many leaders are finding that their old hierarchical model of I'm the boss, I have the title, I have the position, so you will follow me or you will take my direction. That is fading away. I mean, it's not that we don't have job titles. It's not that we don't have people that we report to, but I'm talking to a lot of leaders who just they express a growing, it's not so much discomfort, but a growing uncertainty regarding their own influence and power over others. I had a leader say to me, it seems like with the younger generations in particular, I just don't vibe with them. I just don't. I'm used to giving direction and then people jumping and driving themselves because of what I say or what I do. And he just says, I'm not used to people asking me why so often. And and so I think in those extreme situations like you described with Everest, where we're all stripped down, or everybody is stripped down to their essentials as a human, and we are a group of humans, there's got to be something very primal there, where those humans who now are stripped down and are as focused on survival as they are on anything else, I think our very natural human instincts for leadership have to come out, and then some come out as leading from the front, some leading
Mhm.
from behind, some taking care of others,
Mm.
probably the way we would in a natural tribal environment. I think both
Mm.
of those examples have a high degree of relevance today.
Mm. Yeah.
What drives you personally when you and when you are thinking of yourself as a leader, as and you've recently written a book, and we'll come to that in a second. But even writing a book on leadership, on your experiences, it's a way of leading others. It's a way of getting your leadership message out into the world,
Mhm.
and so what drives you personally to want to lead others?
Um, I lead. It's a really really good question, and yes, as you said, we will talk about the book as well. But I lead because I really know what it feels like to be silenced. Okay, so I know that I had to shrink when I was in my younger days, basically, to really question my worth, and I really felt invisible in many many occasions. But it's also to know the power of someone seeing something in you before you can actually see it yourself, and that is really really powerful. This is already, a leader who can actually do something like that. So what drive me is the possibility that I can be that person for someone else. So that may be that my story, or what I say to you, how I show up, the fact that I want to be authentic. Um, that can give someone permission to use their own voice, or to try again when they felt like there were no way forward, or to see that leadership as something that
Mhm.
can actually start within. So the leadership to me is not about hierarchy or status, but it's about impact. That's
Yeah,
really what leadership actually is for me. It's about how we make people feel. Okay, so I am actually driven by, again, by a deep belief that we all have the capacity to lead in our own way, like I mentioned earlier, at Everest or in the
yeah.
Arctic. But this is done actually with empathy, with purpose, and with that presence, because of who you are. So what matters to me is really about helping others and reconnect to their own sense of value. So showing them what they are capable of, and keep going, keep showing them, and keep them believing that they can actually do what they want to do if they really truly believe in themselves.
I do think that your story of feeling in your early years like it was up to you to find a way to fit in. It was up to
Mm,
you to find your
mm,
place. It was up to you to evolve to fit the world,
mm,
and it taking you a while before you finally got your footing and gained enough confidence to say, well, no, it's not up to me to fit into the world's mold of what's expected of me, but I
mm.
can, in fact, decide what I'm going to be, decide
Yeah.
how I'm going to be. And I think that's a journey a lot of people go through in their early years. I know I went through it. Who am I? Who do I need to be in order to be successful? I can dance slower. I can dance faster. I can talk more. I can talk less. Completely morphing and shifting, and then you lose yourself.
Yes.
You lose
Yeah.
yourself trying too hard to be what they tell you you should be, or they tell you that
Yes.
they want
Yeah.
you to be.
Yeah.
I think for me, there was a big epiphany when I was working so hard, and I was doing all the things that I was told to do, and I got passed over for a promotion, and I remember being surprised because I can't be any more. I can't work any
Mm,
harder. I can't think any deeper. I can't do any more. This is everything I can be, and I was so sure that this promotion was going to be mine because I was, in fact, a
mm.
perfect fit. Now, this was 30 years ago, and by the way, if you're one of those people who didn't promote me 30 years ago, I still think you're wrong. I still think I would have been a good fit. However, um, I sat back and I thought, I just can't do this any longer.
Mm,
I can't just be jumping through their hoops. But then that kind of forces you into a new thought process of, well, then who am I? If you've spent so
Yes.
long
Yeah.
trying to be
Yeah.
what they want you to be,
Mm.
that next point of, well, then who am I? That takes a lot of deep thinking, and
Mm.
those experiences like Everest
Yeah.
and the Arctic, I think can be profound for us when
Yeah.
we're in that search. Do
Mm.
you have an
And
example of a? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
no, 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 no. That's fine. I was just going to add to that. It's also, I think, a lot of courage that you need as well to try to bring that together, and to really say to yourself, okay, I want something different. I want to be someone else. I want to show all of these people, that those that did not promote me 30 years ago, they were
Yeah,
completely wrong, and look at me now. But not to show off, but to show up, if that makes sense. To
yes.
show yourself also what you're capable of, and show others that they made that mistake. So it's really about that courage and stepping outside of your comfort zone.
I had a young woman say to me several weeks ago. She said, "The thing is with leaders, particularly my leaders. This is the young woman speaking. I see them." She said, "I see them clearly, and I see that they aren't all that. I see that they have gaps, they have weaknesses. Some of their ideas are good, but a lot of their ideas not so good. I feel like I see them clearly,
Mm.
but I feel like they don't see me. I'm
Yes.
invisible to them.
Yeah.
They look at me and they just see a list of projects or
Yeah.
tasks or
Yeah.
OKRs or KPIs." And she said, they don't actually see me. And she was yearning for a leader who would see her, both her capabilities and her areas for improvement, and help her grow. But that's relatively rare, unfortunately, in today's world. And I get how challenging it is, because when I
Yeah.
have the same conversation with leaders, they will say, "Well, yeah, I want to, but that takes so much time."
Yes.
In fact, just yesterday, I had a leader said to me, and this is a gentleman in his early 60s, and he said, "I know they want more time. I know they want more attention. I know they want more. I just don't have more to give."
Mm.
Now, this leader, because he owned his own business, he basically had the power to say that, to say, "Look, I'm giving as much as I can." Most leaders instead just find themselves in a position where they feel inadequate. They feel like
Mm. Mm.
they can't find the energy or the time to give what their people really want or really
Mm.
need.
Mm.
And so then they fall back to hierarchy. They fall back to, well, let's just manage by projects and initiatives, and let's just get our stuff done, because they don't feel competent to be
Mm.
that deeper leader. I was going to ask you, do you have
Mm.
any great examples of a leader that you have learned from in your world?
It's a great question. Yeah, I do, because in fact I talk about. There's a part of my book which is called Beyond the Ice. There's a section where I explore what actually great leadership looks like, and and I guess I want to take the same example because this person really stays with me. One of the leader who had the biggest impact on me wasn't even one of my direct manager back in those days. He was a CFO, and I worked with him for many, many years. And what really stood out was how he made everyone around him feel seen and valued, right? So no matter what his role or the level that he was in, he led by example. He led with real presence, and he really listened fully, entirely, with his entire body. You could really see that he was there with you in the room. When he was communicating with you, it was there. It was looking at you, right at you, and you could see that he really cared, right?
Hmm.
So he created that space where people could actually speak up without fear. And I remember he once sat down and he offered me this 360-degree view of my whole career, showing me the path that I had not even considered myself. So he didn't do it because he had to. he actually did it because he knew that it was actually going to benefit me in some ways, but also because he cared. And I think that's what, to come back on your example earlier with this young woman, I think, that's what it is. We are missing that. We are invisible. We are yearning to be called up, to be seen, to be wanting to do something, to show what we are actually capable of. What made him stand out as well wasn't just his status, as I said, because it's not because he was a CFO. He could have just been, another person, just like myself, another manager. But it was that he showed up without ego, without pretension. There was no mask, there was no pretense, there was no performance, and there was just that genuine commitment to people. So that, to me, is what leadership should be. It's about being grounded and about being human. And often the best leaders are the one who goes unrecognized. And you gave that example earlier when you said you were looking, for that promotion. You were convinced you were going to get it because there was no other way, because you had done everything, because you were perfect for that position. But you see, we are not being seen like that. And to me, again, leadership is really it's not about being put in the spotlight because of your title or because of your name. It's about because of what you can actually do to others.
And when I think back to that, and I haven't thought of that incident in such a long time, but when I think back to it, had someone come to me and said, "Hey, we have faith in you. We think you're going to be ready to take the next step as a leader, but here are some areas for growth that we think you need to work on before you're ready." But that's not what happened. And I know this happens in corporate work all the time. It wasn't about capability. It's somebody knew somebody, and somebody had already decided they were comfortable. They wanted a particular person in the role from outside the business. They wanted to bring someone new in, and that was it. It was just a connection. Somebody had a connection. Now, they weren't comfortable saying it that way. They weren't comfortable expressing that, but they hired someone for that role. And then I ended up reporting to this person. So I'm reporting to the guy who basically got the job that I wanted. And we worked our way through it. It was okay, but not surprisingly, I eventually moved on. And it was the best thing for me. It was a good thing for me in the end. But when I talk to leaders of, I'm going to say, a particular generation or a particular age, leaders who have already spent 20 or 30 years in the workforce and maybe are on their last 10 or their last 20 years, they often get impatient when we start to talk like this, because what we're essentially saying is your old playbook doesn't work as well anymore. The world where everyone looks the same, everyone fits the mold, everyone simply salutes and follows orders, that world is going away rapidly. It's burning away rapidly. And if you want a successful next 20 or next 10 years, you're going to have to evolve. I mean, it's not going to work the way it used to work. And I'm sorry, but it just isn't going to work. You could try to just squeeze out another 4 or 5 years, maybe by just using your old playbook. But I don't think you're doing others a service. You're not even doing yourself a service. Even if you're in your last 5 years, it's not too late to evolve. It's not too late to develop a new mindset and to try something new. But I do encounter, when leaders are being very, honest and authentic with me, if we're having one-on-one conversations, a lot of discomfort, uncertainty, resistance. And anytime you have discomfort and uncertainty, the tendency is just to lean toward how things were, how things have been successful in the past, because change is always hard for a lot of people. Do you have any examples of sort of the opposite of a great leader, like leaders who, through their example, actually showed you how to not do it?
Yeah, I could give probably quite a few of these, unfortunately. Um, and it's an interesting question because it sounds like we know it all and and we wouldn't do it. But I think it's also by seeing how it has been done, what you don't want to be replicated. So I think it's a great example, even if back in those days when those things have happened, it wasn't great and it was really difficult to talk to the client afterwards for one reason or another. I think it actually helps you to become that better leader, I would say. So yes, to answer your question, yes, definitely. If I can think of one particular one, I was working under a leader who really showed me what not to do, what not, not how to lead, basically.
Mhm.
So she always assumed that she knew best all the time. So no matter what it was, and one day we had, as a team, we were working on a really critical project, and instead of working with the team, what she did is she actually bypassed us completely and she went directly to the senior contact in those countries that we were responsible for. And then she gave some very specific instruction that were specific to her, actually, but they were very unclear and they were completely disconnected from the actual work that they were supposed to do. So you can just imagine, a global audience, they couldn't really understand her because she was always using very difficult vocabulary and those very British expressions and so on. And they were just like, what does that even mean? What does she want from us? But they
Mhm.
were so scared. They feared that to say no, basically. So there was a huge, confusion and chaos, and people didn't know what to do or who to listen to, basically. So eventually, they stopped going to her altogether, and they came to us as a team for the answers that they actually needed to try to understand. I remember them calling me and saying, Leela, can you just help me? What does she need? What does she want? This is what we did. How can I actually change it? I can't retract back, and so on and so on. So that experience really taught me something really important, because leadership is not about being the person who is shouting the most, like she was, or
Mhm.
proving that she was in charge. Leadership is really not about that. It's about building trust by listening and involving other people and really creating a clarity, because there was no clarity there. All there was that confusion instead. So when leaders cut people out, like she was trying to do, they might actually feel efficient, but they actually lose the connection and the trust that make other people want to follow them. When you give that sort of behavior as a leader, no one wants to follow you. People actually want to run a mile from you and think,
Mhm.
gosh, I just want to do this a different way. So yeah, that's just one among millions of them that I have, but I think that's one of the most recent one that I could actually give, and that really makes sense here.
Well, and what I want to clarify is I've been a bad leader. I've had plenty of mistakes and plenty of challenges. When I look back at a career, there are so many moments where I look back and think, oh man, I should have handled this differently. Now, I will say, as much as I have had challenges and have grown as a leader, I don't think I've ever been a bully. And
Mm,
I'm surprised, though, how often leadership bullies manage to rise up in
yeah,
organizations. That
yeah,
bullying seems to work for some people. I'm not saying it's right. I don't support it. Um, but there does come a point where that bullying nature does produce less and less positive impact, or less and less impact. I think
mm,
that there was a time when you could rise and rise and rise as a bully leader, and there are still some businesses where you can, but ultimately the way our world is shifting is there's more power in the hands of the employees, more power in the hands of people who are selecting jobs for a lot of reasons. One of which, I'll just give you one example. If you annoy an employee, or you make fun of them, or you make them feel embarrassed, or you criticize them in front of other people, or whatever the behavior might be, and that employee goes back to their desk and sits down and tries to start doing their work, right there on their computer screen is LinkedIn. And LinkedIn is happy to say to you, oh, here are some jobs you might want
Yeah,
to consider. It's so much easier today than it was 10 or 20 years ago to at
definitely.
least open the screen and say, oh, I might explore that. That might be that grass might be greener on that side. And so it's taken that power to some degree out of the hands of leaders and put it into the hands of employees to say, it's relatively easy to at least start exploring. And once you start exploring, once that you cross that
Yeah,
bridge,
yeah,
it's just like in human relationships. Once you say to yourself, well, I'm serious with someone, but I'm going to see what it's like to have coffee with this other person. And if we go out and have coffee, then maybe we have lunch. Then maybe we, have dinner or whatever. The same is true when it comes to employment. Once you pass that line where you're putting resumes out, and then someone wants to talk to you, and then someone is having conversations with you, the die is cast, so to speak. It makes it much easier to lose people today. And who do you lose mostly? You lose the people creating the most value.
yeah,
You don't
yeah,
lose the people who are desperate for work. You lose the people who create value.
yeah.
And so then again, that puts additional pressure on leaders today.
It
Um,
does. I want to, sorry to interrupt you, Dan. I want to talk about something that you mentioned just a few
mhm,
minutes ago. You said about, that you were perhaps not always, a great leader and so on. And I think that that's, I can say exactly the same thing for myself. No one is born as a perfect leader. Obviously, we know all of this, and by the example that I've just given, we know all of these things because one of the things that I always tend to say is we never grow old enough to make all of the mistakes ourselves. So therefore, I'm learning also from other people.
yeah,
Now, having said that, that doesn't mean that I am a perfect leader. Far from it. What I know is actually from my mistake, is from being vulnerable and being able to admit it and being able to say, look, this is the way that I am today because I had to go through all of that big mountain out there to be able to, and that took me to where I am today, right? So, there is nobody who is actually born as the perfect leader and being able to teach others, this is how you do it. One of the, I've just wrote it down, not to forget it actually, you mentioned also bully. And I think you're so right. I think because I had also another boss also who was a real bully, and this was very early on into my career. I didn't really know what to do and how to do it, to try to push myself and to stand for myself basically. And I think when I look back now, if I had had the experience and the expertise of what I have nowadays, this situation would have never ended like it did. In the end, all I wanted was just to leave that company. I just wanted to leave that department. I wanted to look elsewhere, like you said, because the grass was definitely going to be greener into
mhm,
another department rather than staying there into somewhere where someone is bullying you constantly, is always putting you into a situation where you didn't expect and making you ashamed in front of other people as well. And that makes you such a better leader already by knowing that this is not what you want to put others through when you are
yeah.
that leader. It's really about respecting people. To me, that's what it is. So I want them to, um, if they look at me as a leader, I want them to remember one thing. I want them to be impacted, but as a positive way, and to really look up there and say, look, I can do this. If she did it, I can do it. That's really what I want.
I worked for one organization where there was one particular bully manager. Nobody wanted to work for him. Nobody wanted to report to him. People, once they figured that out, tried to find other areas of the business that they could gravitate toward. So he had a relatively high turnover rate, but based on the metrics he was being measured by, and he was a leader of operations, and he was always able to post pretty decent metrics. And one of the things that his leader, who was a relatively good person, a relatively good leader, I was always intrigued by, why is this leader, this senior leader, allowing such a bully to operate? And at one point, someone did ask him that, and this person said, well, that's a tough role. You're dealing with tough people, tough situations, and I really need someone who's tough in that role. And this nice leader had convinced himself that in this operations area, he needed a tough guy. Otherwise, people were going to walk over him.
Yeah.
And as I think back about that a little more deeply, I think what it really was that bully was also bullying up. He wasn't just bullying down, he was bullying up. And I think many of us have this tendency, like on a school playground, we just try to avoid the bully. We are uncomfortable with the tension. And nobody had the power, or nobody who had the power was willing to step up and poke the bully in the eye. And so when that does happen, I always admire leaders, and even people who are not leaders, just people who are individual contributors, who refuse to be bullied, who will poke the bully in the eye. Unfortunately, they pay a price sometimes. Sometimes poking the bully in the eye means the bully decides you're not going to be there anymore. And now I have people who will tell me, well, that doesn't happen anymore. We have protections, we have human resources, we have rules and regulations and internal regulations and external laws. It still happens. I absolutely know that it still happens. And the kinds of things that you're describing, I absolutely know that they still happen, because I hear from those people every week. I hear people who read my first book, Workplace Poker, will send emails to me. People who have seen the podcast will send emails or stories to me. And some of the stories just take your breath away. And it reminds me, it still happens. Just because we're describing a world that could be better doesn't mean that we've arrived at that place yet. I wanted to talk about your book, Beyond the Ice, because within that book, you've made an effort to kind of synthesize a lifetime of learning, leveraging those experiences as your metaphor. But if you were, whether referencing the book itself or just in general, if you were to crystallize your lifetime of experience, what would you share with us? As you've delivered training, you've delivered speeches, you've thought a lot about leadership. It's not fair to ask you to crystallize all of that into a few minutes, but if you were to, what would that be?
So, I think to come back on the leadership itself, I think it is not actually something that you earn once and then you keep it, right? It's something that you live by daily, step by step, one decision at a time. And it's how you speak when no one is watching you. It's how you act when nobody is actually going to see what you are doing. Okay, it's how you hold others up when their things are actually falling apart. Okay, it's really about constantly going back to your own values. My values are just so important to me, and I always try to go back to them whenever I can, even when it would be easier not to. Okay, sometimes it's just so much easier just not to stick with it because the situation is here, but you have your values and you have to stick by them. And that's what I tend to always teach my children as well. So for me, leadership is built the same way as trust, right? It's grounded, it's credibility, it's relationship, it's communication, and it's not about having all of the answers, right? It's really about being real with people, being authentic. It's when, because I think when you come from a place of authenticity, it does last. Okay, so you carry it with you. Again, no matter your role, no matter your title, no matter your position, okay, you don't have to be perfect to lead with power, okay, but you do have to be committed. And to me, that commitment, it's all around listening to people, about learning. Okay, so I learn every day. Every day I'm learning here. You know, some of the things that you said on the podcast, I learn a lot of things today, yesterday, tomorrow. It's really about keep going, keep learning, keep reinventing yourself, keep trying to get on for the next 5 years or 10 years, like you mentioned earlier. You know, what are we going to be? Yes, if we don't step outside of this comfort zone, we are not going to go anywhere, right? So to me, it's about that, keeping listening, to commit to learn constantly, and to lead as the person that you are, not the one that you think you are supposed to be. Because as a leader, a lot of people say, oh, I am a leader and I'm supposed to do X, Y, and Z, and these people are going to do this and that. But it's not like that. It's really about who you are, and showing up as that person. I don't
And
know if that really
some
answers the questions,
it
but
well it does, and you used the word power, and that prompted this thought from me, because I think some people misinterpret everything, the things that you're saying, as that being a soft approach to leadership, a soft approach to leading people. But in fact, that can be a very powerful way. But it's it's leadership power that has more of a soft touch. It's more of a it is a very human approach to leadership, but it's not soft. It is, in fact, probably the most powerful approach to leadership. When I think back to some of the people who've been leaders in my life, they've had a they've had a gentle touch with me, but it was a very powerful touch. It was a very powerful nudge in a particular direction. Sometimes all it takes, as you said, is someone seeing you,
yeah,
listening to you, maybe having a bit of a suggestion, maybe having a bit of a thought, what you might want to consider. Almost, in the way that you. I don't do a lot of horseback riding, but I've ridden horses enough to know that when you are confident, when you're a confident rider, you direct the horse with very gentle nudges. It's when you lack confidence and the horse senses that you lack confidence, then you have to overcompensate. You have to over pull or push to try to drive the horse in a particular direction. If you're a confident rider, the horse almost instinctively senses your nudge, and it can be almost invisible in terms of that kind of leadership. But that also takes confidence, and it takes a while sometimes, I think, for leaders to build that kind of confidence. Maybe some have it from the very get-go, but I think it's relatively rare. Most people start thinking, well, if I'm going to lead, then I have to have certain leadership behaviors, because I have to be confident. I have to express what I want to have happen, and that those things are true, but it can be done gently as well as,
yes,
with bombast. Um,
yeah,
and what I love about the approach in Beyond the Ice is, while you do use your icebound experiences as the metaphor or the analogy, it's very relatable. You share very real world, relatable stories, and I think that's oftentimes how we learn the most. We hear somebody's story, we learn the lessons, because we can't all have all of these experiences. So I don't know. Personally, I don't know that I would survive Everest. I don't know that I would survive the Arctic. And I'm joking, but I probably would survive. But I would rather learn through your experience than go do it myself, because I do not like cold weather. I do
I
not
hate
like
cold
being
weather. I
icebound.
absolutely hate cold weather. I
So
remember when they first when I got selected, I even thought to myself, why am I actually even doing this? This is crazy. And even in Everest, it wasn't as cold, obviously. but it was still cold, and it's not nice. It's not
What
nice, but you
surprised you when you go back to the Arctic? We've all seen National Geographic specials. We've all seen on television or movies the Arctic. What surprised you the most when your actual experience of it? What was a surprise to you?
I think the biggest surprise was that for 8 months, they told us, the company told us that it was going to be only, and I'm going to put this into quote, only -20. And it turned out to be in springtime, it got to be -40. And even the Inuits out there told us that it had never happened, like in history,
Uh-huh.
that kind of temperature in the springtime. So I think that really surprised me. But let alone this, let's talk seriously about the skills. I think what surprised me the most was how, as a team, we got on to do all we did. We did not really know each other because, let me just explain very briefly. Although we were all part of the same company, we were all from different offices and different departments, so no one really knew one another as such, and we had to work together, to train together, but also once we got to the Arctic, to realize what were the skills of each other to be able to do what we had to do. And you have a lot of assumption when you get out there,
Hmm.
and you put a lot of stereotypes on people as well, thinking, oh, gosh, they're never going to be able to do this for whatever reason. But at the end of it, I think my biggest surprise was what you can pull through together as a team when you bang your heads together, because you become so strong. And the most, I think, the secret of it all is to be vulnerable, is to be able to open up and to
Hmm.
say, right, this is what I'm good at, this is what I don't know how to do. So who else can actually do this? Because I can do that, I'm really strong at that. And I think as a team is all about that collaboration. If we had not have had those conversation together, where we really had to sit down, and what I mean by sitting down, we could never actually sit down because we didn't have any chairs or anything, so you just had to sit on the ice, and we slept on those tents the whole time. Um, in, I, I really think that it it became something where you had to really stop and think about what you wanted. Okay, back at the time we were all leaders in our own ways, but we came back out of this as bigger leaders that we never thought we were capable of being.
I think humans can learn a lot from those extreme situations, particularly if it's an extreme situation where your old hierarchy just is no longer applicable, your old working relationships. Because I do think sometimes we get into our corporate structure. You have people in their particular positions with their particular levels of authority, and those become comforting blankets or shawls around them. Where I'm the VP of marketing, and that's both my identity and that's my power source. Or I'm the VP of technology, or what whatever the role might be. And when you can disconnect people from those roles, sometimes you realize what a limitation that structure was, because it creates safety, it creates comfort, but also causes people to stop growing,
Yes.
can cause people to stop growing or stop developing,
Yeah.
um, and stop envisioning themselves as something more or something different. I love to hear stories about taking groups of people who have a certain relationship with each other,
Mm.
putting them in an extreme environment where those relationships just don't work anymore, or just aren't relevant anymore. And then people have to figure out, who can we count on?
Yeah.
Who should we ask for insight from?
Yeah.
Who should do what? And that can be very painful as groups figure that out. And while it's not always true, sometimes what you find is that the most senior of the leaders, you can't count on them for as
No.
much as you
No.
probably
Yeah.
thought you could count on them
Yeah.
for.
Absolutely.
Um, and I think that leader, sometimes that senior leadership role does not build strengths in people. It actually causes leaders to get diminished in that senior leadership role because
Mm-hmm.
they're surrounded by people doing the work. They're
Yeah.
surrounded by people doing things, and if the senior leader or leaders are no longer in the game, doing
Mm.
the work, making things happen, putting themselves on the front lines, so to speak. It's not always true, but I see it often being true that senior leaders in this bubble that surrounds them,
Mm.
over time, their muscles atrophy because
Yeah.
their muscles are not being exercised.
Yeah.
They're not being
That's
pushed. They're
right.
not being pressed.
Yeah.
And so then they shrink and they shrink. Now they still have their position, they still have their title, they still wear their nice clothes, they still drive their nice cars, they still have all of the accoutrements of the position, and they may live out their days. For
Mm.
the last 5 or 10 years, it's possible, but it's not uncommon when leaders have shrunk inside their bubble
Mm.
to make mistakes,
Yeah.
to do things that in hindsight or from a distance, you think, "Oh, that's stupid. Why would you decide that? Why would you do that? Why would you make that decision?" Because you're not a stupid person, but within their bubble, leaders can shrink. Their
Yeah.
their experience actually
Absolutely.
causes them to be less and less smart
Mm.
or insightful or
Mm.
whatever, and that will lead them to making sometimes very, very big mistakes. Um, um, and so I'm intrigued oftentimes by the story of smart leaders making dumb choices or dumb decisions. And if you're close enough to the situation to peel the layers away, often it is them shrinking in their role, not continuing to grow in their role. Um, and also, the world is changing. The world is it. You just can't get away from it. The world is
Yeah.
is, is changing, and it's sometimes I worry that I have a U.S. centric point of view because if I just look at the U.S., which I'm most familiar with, I mean, I have clients and friends and connections like you around the globe, but my viewpoint tends to be U.S. centric, and I see a lot of changes, and I wonder sometimes, is that true of the rest of the world? I suspect it is, just from what you're sharing. When you take a global point of view, how do you see, I guess, what I would call the optimal leadership model? How do you see it evolving, or how have you seen it evolve over the last couple of decades?
Mm. I don't actually think, I don't really believe that there is a single optimal model as such, not anymore anyway.
Yeah,
I think the world is too fluid, is too complex nowadays, it is too layered with one size, fit it all framework sort of thing. But what I do see though is a shift towards the leadership that put people first. Okay, so that kind that put listening before reaching out. That values adaptability over that perfection that we were talking about earlier. The kind that knows the clarity is not about having all of the answers all the time. We don't always have the answers anyway. But it's really about making space for people to think, to feel, to respond with that purpose. And to come back on what you were saying about the bubble earlier, I was listening to you and I was thinking that's why communication is so important there, because these leaders are within their bubbles and they don't even know what's happening. They don't even realize that they're shrinking because they're just like so engrossed into what they're doing, and no one else is daring almost,
yeah,
telling them, because they are the big leaders with the big names, and oh, we can't just go next to them, we can't go and tell them that because they're going to be offended. You see, I think as the world continues to shift, the leaders who will make the biggest difference are not the one who are actually speaking the most, but they are the one who listen the best. I
yes,
think I think that's really what it is. So they are the one that we are actually going to stay open, just like the example that I gave you earlier about the CFO. So if you stay, if you decide that you're actually going to continue learning, you are going to stay close to the human side of the work. And that's what we want. It's all about that human side. At least to me, I know that nowadays, it's going to be it's going to a different era now with AI and so on. But I really think that the human side of the work is just so important.
So important, and yet so challenged right now. When you look at leaders across the world, um, I know there are exceptions, but broadly speaking, not just in the US, but the US, the UK, Western Europe, Eastern Europe, Asia, there are so many global leaders, world leaders, political leaders, business leaders who just are not meeting this moment. They're meeting the moment for them. I was speaking to a young person about 2 months ago, and um, as she talked about leadership, she was becoming more and more agitated just about the nature of the world, like the state of the world. And she said to me, how can you expect me to respect leaders who are making the kinds of decisions, who are enriching themselves over the people that either report to them or the people that vote for them? They're enriching themselves, they're enriching their friends. Today's system doesn't work for people like me, she said. I am working as hard as I can work, and I can't afford my monthly rent every month and still afford my food and still afford the education for my children and still afford healthcare. She said, every month I am having to make choices that I shouldn't have to make, that my parents didn't have to make. And she said, I don't want to be a billionaire. She said, I wouldn't mind, but I don't want to be a billionaire. I want to have a life where I'm not always worried about money. And she
Yeah.
said, right now I am always worried about money. It's like I am I am one healthcare issue away. I am one uh, financial issue away from being in really tough uh, situations. And she said, I'm not the only one. Most of my friends are this way as well. And she said, so we're angry. We are angry. She said, she also said, I don't know exactly how much the CEO of our business makes, but I've gone on Google Maps and I've seen his home. I've gone, so we have all of these tools. So she said, I've seen his home. I see what he drives. I see where he lives. And then I look at the rest of us and how we're living, and you cannot tell me that that's right, that that's fair. And she said, I do not begrudge someone being successful, but it just doesn't seem like the system is working for the majority of us. And she said, if it gets much worse, I don't know what we're going to do. I don't know what I'm going to do, but there is this visceral anger from a lot of worker level employees, and I think that pressure is going to find its way out at some point. But what do our leaders do in response to this? Because they probably would acknowledge that there's a lot of agitation and anger and resentment in the world. What do they do? Instead of trying to solve that problem, they decide, well, I'm going to pit this group against this group. I'm going to make this group, I'm going to say to this group, well, the reason your life isn't what you want it to be, it's not me, it's them. We need to do something about them, or we need to get rid of them, or we need to dial up our anger toward them. And they're pitting us against each other, and they're leveraging social media, they're leveraging information and misinformation. And it feels to me like um, there was a time when you could control the culture of your business and not worry too much about the culture outside of that culture. I think that is even changing, where you can't just focus on the culture of your business. Oh, we have a welcoming, inclusive culture here in our organization. We see everyone, we talk to everyone, we make sure everybody has a voice. You can have a beautiful culture inside your business. It's still going to be impacted by this broader culture outside of your
Yeah.
business, because
Yeah.
that culture is more powerful and it's going to be coming into your business, both your employees,
Whether yeah,
customers.
whether you
Absolutely.
like it or not, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
So I don't know if I'm too cynical, too doubtful, but the world needs better leaders, more leaders like you're describing now. And when you take something like your book, Beyond the Ice, it maybe isn't going to change the world, but maybe it is in a small way. Maybe each of these is a small stepping stone in the right direction. So I want to be respectful of your time, Leela, and I know we're going to wrap this up in a few minutes, but I want to make sure you've had a chance because I will make sure that within the show notes of this program, people can find a link to your book. They can find a link to your
Thank
LinkedIn
you.
page. They can
Thank
find a
you.
link to the Amazon page where they can purchase your book, and so they'll be able to do all of that. And I would strongly encourage anybody who is looking to evolve as a leader. Your book is filled with great stories, great examples, great ideas, and they're very useful. I mean, they're very practical. It's not just high-minded theory or beautiful prose. It's actually a very practical book
Thank you.
to read. And then I would encourage you also to think about your own experiences. Like what can you do? You may not be able to go to the Arctic. You may not be able to go and climb Everest, but there are things that you can do to break yourself out of your comfort zone, to break your
Absolutely.
group, your
Yeah.
team out of your comfort zone.
Yeah.
Um, so I'll shut up.
I
Any final thoughts from you, Leela?
No, 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 don't shut up. I love it, and I could listen to to your theories and to you for forever. But I think one of the things that you mentioned is the most important thing here. If I wanted to wrap up here, I would say you don't need to go to the Arctic or to go to Everest, to become a leader. It's really even about doing something that you've always been scared of doing. So even if it's about crossing the road, if it's about going for a swim, it's about going, on the motorway after you had an accident, whatever that is really what they say, is what rocks your boat. So it's not about doing something that is extraordinary, because I'm not extraordinary. I'm just like a normal human being, just like you and I, just like everyone else. I think you want to become that person. Just take it one step at a time and just decide what you want. What is it that you want for yourself, not for what someone else wants from you. It's really about that influence that you're getting. It's not about being manipulated. It's really about wanting to do it because that is going to take you somewhere where you've always wanted to be. And that to me is the most important thing to be a leader.
This provokes a thought from me because um, I I have spent a lot of time asking myself in the last few years, what mark do I want to leave? First of all, on my family, but then on the people that are close around me, the people that I work closely with, and then working my way out. What mark do I want to leave? What is the legacy that I want to leave? Um, and at least for me, the legacy isn't about houses or cars or clothes or money. It is about the lasting impact on others. And I think that's probably true of a lot of us, that we would like to know that we've left a lasting impact. It doesn't have to be on 300,000 people. Sometimes just knowing that you had one lasting impact on one person, that you helped her or him make an adjustment to how they lead or how they interact with work. Um, I also think there is so much workplace dissatisfaction. It would surprise, I think, most leaders if they ever had a moment where they could just see the reality of how their workers really think about them, how their workers really think about their work. There's a lot more cynicism and stress and restlessness than most leaders realize. Um, and if you could help people achieve positive and productive lives and maybe reduce some of that restlessness just a bit so that their work life could be a positive part of their life, not their entire life. Work should have its place, and family should have its place, and other things should have their place. If you can be a part of helping people achieve that balance, that can be a huge impact on others. So let me say this finally, Leela. So strongly recommend the book. Uh, go to Amazon or your favorite book provider, and you'll find Beyond the Ice. There's also a Beyond the Ice journal
There's a
that's
journal as well.
available. So
Yes,
I
yes.
would encourage you to buy the journal as well. It's a great tool um, for thinking through the things that the book is prompting in you. But again, also Leela Bassi, fantastic keynote speaker, fantastic corporate trainer. You also are great at just and I know this from personal experience. You're great at just the what would we call it? The mundane day-to-day corporate training. You bring some of the most boring topics to life in a way that I think people would be very impressed with. So with that, Leela, thank you for this. This has been very generous of you. Um, and I'm sure you and I will talk again quite soon.
Thank you very much for having me on the podcast. It was really my pleasure to be here. I learned a lot today, so thank you for having me and for being who you are. Thank you very much.
And thank you for making good on my promise that Leela is so refined and elegant. So you've upped our game. You have made us a more elegant and refined podcast. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dan.
Bye.
Thank you.